The U.S. reiterates its rock-solid commitment to Taiwan's defense, and the former Japanese prime minister said Japan and the U.S. could not stand by if China attacked Taiwan. Hundreds of Taiwan nationals abroad are being extradited every year not to Taiwan but to China, and it's all linked to Beijing's One China policy. U.S. Congress members are working to teach children about the truth of communism. They tell us why they see it as a bigger threat now than ever before. Facebook and Twitter are taking action on accounts linked to Chinese propaganda campaigns. Thousands have already been removed. And the deaths of nearly 40 women prisoners of conscience over 2 decades have been linked to a single prison in China, most recently a woman close to 80 years old. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. First, we looked at Taiwan. The top U.S. diplomat for Asia publicly voiced support for Taiwan. Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs, Daniel Crittenbrink, spoke in Singapore on Thursday, saying the U.S. has a rock-solid commitment to assisting Taiwan. He said, as the threat and coercion from the People's Republic of China increases, I think we need to respond as well in an appropriate way. He specifically cited support over self-defense and trade, adding the U.S. intends to live up to its rock-solid obligations and commitments. And this October, when he was asked about defending Taiwan, U.S. President Joe Biden responded to reporters, saying, yes, we have a commitment to that. Beijing responds in mere hours after the former Japanese prime minister said Japan and the United States could not stand by if China attacked Taiwan. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman said on Wednesday that China is strongly dissatisfied with former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's comments, and that China firmly opposes it. In some of the strongest words we've seen from the ministry, the spokesman said anyone who challenges the bottom line of the Chinese people will get their heads badly battered. On top of that, the Chinese assistant foreign minister made an urgent appointment with the Japanese ambassador to China to lodge a solemn representation regarding Abe's remarks. But the Japanese ambassador says Japan cannot accept China's one-sided claims. Abe made the remarks at a Taiwanese think tank's virtual forum on Wednesday. He also said that a Taiwan emergency is a Japanese emergency and therefore an emergency for the Japan-U.S. alliance. Japan is developing longer-range ballistic missiles in preparation for a possible China confrontation. The Japanese Defense Ministry plans to complete construction of these missiles by the mid-2020s, and they are expected to be able to travel more than 600 miles. An emergency exercise for responding to power cuts triggered heated discussion among Chinese netizens. It was carried out in the southern Chinese province Fujian earlier this week. This is the country's closest province to Taiwan. The 4 cities involved are separated from Taiwan by a narrow waterway. The Tuesday exercise is the largest electric power emergency drill the province has seen in years. The reasons for the simulated power cut were first a typhoon and second, other externally inflicted damage. Local media mentioned some specific terms, among them anti-terrorism and cyber attacks. One netizen questioned why they are preparing for typhoon attacks when in winter there is no typhoon at all. Some other netizens linked this move to Taiwan, saying this is a strong signal. China claims Taiwan as its own territory, but Taiwan is self-ruled and has its own government. If a Taiwanese person living in a third country is to be extradited to his own country, should he be sent back to Taiwan or China? A new report shows that hundreds of Taiwanese people every year are sent back to China under Beijing's One China policy. Between 2016 and 2019, within 3 years, over 600 Taiwanese people overseas have been extradited or deported to China, not to Taiwan. This is from a report titled China's Hunt for Taiwanese Overseas, published on Tuesday by a human rights organization, Safeguard Defenders. Under Beijing's pressure, foreign governments deny Taiwan consular requests to send Taiwan nationals back to Taiwan. Instead, they send them to China, even though these people have no family or friends in China. And once they are there, they are often denied contact with Taiwan officials and family members. The report adds, this puts Taiwanese people at risk of severe human rights abuses, as under the Chinese Communist regime, arbitrary detention, torture, and forced confessions are widespread. The move is seen as being used as a tool to undermine Taiwan's sovereignty and to achieve the Chinese Communist Party's political goal of one China. Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said on Wednesday that Beijing has no governance rights over Taiwanese people, and Taiwan is working to get the people involved back in Taiwan for trial. It also urged the international world to take immediate action to stop the practice. The Biden administration is laying out a new strategy for the use of outer space. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris convened the Biden administration's first meeting of the National Space Council. At the meeting, she asked political leaders to promote a responsible civil and commercial use of space. There are growing concerns about China and Russia's presence in space. Harris on Wednesday criticized a Russian space test that endangered the International Space Station with debris. Harris says without clear norms for the responsible use of space, we face real threats to our national and global security. The National Space Council was resurrected during the Trump administration and retained by the Biden administration. And a number of related policies have been retained as well, such as increasing competition with space rivals China and Russia. U.S. officials worry about increased security activity by some of America's major rivals in space. And China's testing hypersonic weapons this year raised further concerns. United States Space Force General David Thompson told the Washington Post on Tuesday that China and Russia are regularly attacking U.S. satellites using non-kinetic means, such as lasers, radio frequency, jammers, and cyber attacks. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says North Korea's missile and weapons developments are increasingly destabilizing security in the region. The U.S. and South Korea are in talks to update their methods of deterring North Korea. NTD's Don Ma has more.
The U.S. and South Korea are eyeing new ways to deter the North Korea threat. The South Korean and U.S. defense chiefs met on Thursday for talks at an annual meeting. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said that North Korea's missile program is of increasing concern.
We also reaffirmed our shared assessment that the DPRK is continuing to advance its missile and weapons programs, which is increasingly destabilizing for regional security.
South Korean Defense Minister Soo Wook says that a changing security environment is what prompted the United States and South Korea to change their strategy toward North Korea. On the other hand, the U.S. and South Korean officials cautioned that updates to contingency war plans don't mean preparation for war. Austin called diplomacy the best approach to North Korea, as long as it's backed up by a credible deterrent. Other than North Korea, the two defense chiefs also talked about China's threat, in particular, its hypersonic weapons.
And I would just point out that the hypersonic capability is a capability, but certainly not the only capability that the PRC has the capability to develop. And my job is to focus on the broader picture and to make sure that we can defend ourselves against any and all threats.
And for the first time, the two chiefs jointly affirmed the importance of preserving peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. This following Japan's former prime minister's remarks on Wednesday, saying that a Chinese invasion of Taiwan would be a danger for Japan. Don Ma, NTD News.
Today in Washington, D.C., Congress members introduced a bill to teach children about communism. They are concerned that the lack of education about communist regimes has led America's young people to root for what they call an ideology that's evil by nature. NTD's Melina Weisskopf brings us more from Capitol Hill.
A group of Congress members expressing why they say the specter of communism is a bigger threat now than ever before and how to overcome this threat. One Congress member says it's every single person's responsibility to take action.
It is now our responsibility. Nobody else, every single one of you, it's in your hands.
The Congress members are introducing a bill called the Crucial Communism Teaching Act, an effort to teach America's young people the legacy of communism.
The Soviet Union is gone, but that legacy has lived on. Started with the radicalism of Marxist-infused radicalism in the 60s, up until the CRT radicalism of today. It's all from the same vein.
The threat of communism, the evil of communism, the inherent evil of communism.
An ideology that's led to countless deaths and ongoing persecutions against people of faith. The Chinese communist regime today still jailing, torturing, and killing Falun Dafa practitioners and Uyghurs.
My sister has been detained since September 2018. More than 3 years now, 3 years, 3 months. I have no idea where she is. The conscience of the world, conscience of the humanity is at test, and we will be failing it. So we must act.
The lead sponsor of this bill, Congresswoman Maria Salazar, comes from a family who fled communist Cuba. She tells us the young generation put Fidel Castro in power because they didn't understand the true nature of communism.
Very concerned that future generations, my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, will say the same thing to us. You didn't teach us how bad this was, and unfortunately, socialism and communism is very pernicious. Once it's in, it's like a pit bull. It grabs you and is not going to let you go. It's an attack on the human fiber. It's an attack on humanity. It's evil. It's very evil, and being so evil, it only destroys the human soul and everything with it.
And Congressman Jacobs says Americans are more vulnerable to this threat now, as principles of faith and family are under attack.
Our faith has been rocked. People believing in God and going in church is weakened right now. Our family structures in a lot of places are weakened.
A 2020 poll reveals that 1 in 5 millennials views communism favorably. And there are even more, 1 in 3 from Generation Z, who buy into the ideology.
Socialism is very appealing to young people. It's very utopian. It's this wonderful idea that we can all have what we want and it will just work, except it never works because it goes directly against human nature. It is a subversive effort. It started with the Soviets. The Soviets have been doing it for decades.
And if this bill does pass through Congress, it will lead to a model curriculum being written and offered to schools that will teach the younger generation about the dangers of the communist ideology. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
The U.S. stock market regulator finalized a rule today that updates audit requirements. Now, Chinese companies that list on U.S. stock exchanges have to disclose whether they're owned or controlled by the Chinese regime. Otherwise, they may be delisted. They also have to provide evidence of their auditing inspections. The law was initially passed in 2020 after Chinese authorities repeatedly refused inspections by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. Then the Chinese company Luckin Coffee fired its CEO after an internal fraud probe, which increased calls for action. Now, the rule can kick off more than 200 companies from U.S. exchanges if they don't follow the new rule. It could also make Chinese companies less attractive for American investors. A new report is detailing the death toll of China's human rights abuses. A 76-year-old Falun Gong practitioner died last month, days after the prison she was detained in suddenly sent her home. Liu Shuhua from northeast China's Liaoning province was supposed to be released in November from the provincial women's prison, but police released her several weeks early in October instead. At the time, she was unconscious and had visibly lost much of her body weight. Police left her with relatives without explaining to her family what had happened to her. She died 3 days later. Liu was sentenced to 6 years in prison because of her faith, the spiritual meditation system Falun Gong. She was already over 70 years old at the time. According to U.S.-based Falun Gong information website Minghui.org, at least 37 Falun Gong practitioners have died after torture in Liaoning Provincial Women's Prison since 2001. But why were they victimized? Because they refused to give up their beliefs and had been trying to expose the communist regime's persecution of the meditation practice. Here are the stories of just a few of those victims. Sun Yuhua from Anshan City was sentenced to 4 years in prison in 2003. She was made to do forced labor and given little food. At night, she was tied to a bed constructed of bare wooden boards designed to prevent her from sleeping. Egged on by police officers, some prisoners physically abused her. She passed away after less than a month into her sentence. In 2008, another Falun Gong practitioner, Si Ying-chun from Huludao City, was sentenced to 7 years in the provincial women's prison because she refused to give up practicing Falun Gong. In March of 2010, prison guards and police officers instructed 9 prisoners to beat her until she lost consciousness. She died soon after at a hospital at the age of 60. Still another practitioner, Ding Zhenfang from Dalian City, was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Years into her sentence, in November of 2008, prison guards strung up Ding to a heating pipe and beat her. She was left that way for 7 days and nights until she reached the brink of death. She died in 2011 at 61 years old. According to the Minghui website, similar incidents have been recorded in every province and region across the country. Falun Gong is a traditional meditation practice that teaches 5 slow-moving exercises and follows the core principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. The Chinese Communist regime has suppressed Falun Gong since 1999. That's out of fear that its widespread popularity will promote free thinking and morality, values that contradict communist rule. Beijing is biting back amid the widespread concern over missing tennis star Peng Shuai. That's as the International Olympic Committee says it has spoken to her again and reconfirmed her well-being. But the rest of the world seems fairly unconvinced.
As concerns continue to swirl about Peng Shuai's safety, the Women's Tennis Association, or WTA, upped its pressure on China Thursday by announcing suspension of all tournaments in the country. That's after it has repeatedly called for proof that Peng is free of censorship and coercion. But the request fell on deaf ears. Though unlike the WTA, the International Olympic Committee seems to have no trouble communicating with Peng. On Wednesday, the IOC claimed it held a second call with her. In a statement, the organization said it shares the same concern as many about the safety of the Chinese tennis star. But just like the last time, it chose to keep the conversation internal. The world has been worried about the Chinese tennis star after she accused one of China's top officials of sexual assault. The IOC also faced criticism for its first video call with Peng last month. After the talk, IOC officials claimed Peng was safe and well, despite offering no proof that she could speak freely. Since Peng first made the accusation, the WTA has taken a strong stance against Beijing's clampdown on her. Now Beijing is biting back. On Thursday, China's foreign ministry took issue with the WTA's China boycott, saying the act is politicizing sports. And on the same day, the editor-in-chief of one of China's top media mouthpieces attacked the WTA on Twitter. In a post, he claimed the tennis boycott violates Peng Shuai's freedom of expression. But neither the editor's post nor the WTA's withdrawal made it to mainstream news inside China. Censors there are still closely monitoring and deleting all discussions about Peng Shuai.
A blow to the Chinese propaganda machine. Facebook removed hundreds more accounts linked to a Chinese firm. This company created a fake public figure this summer, a Swiss biologist. The mysterious internet persona spread the Chinese Communist Party's narrative and accused the U.S. of interfering in the search for the origin of COVID-19, or the CCP virus. That's until recently, when Facebook researchers found this so-called expert had been created by a Chinese tech company. The firm, called the Sichuan Silence Information Technology, did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Facebook removed more than 500 accounts linked to the firm on Wednesday. Going by the non-Swiss name Wilson Edwards, the so-called expert had been widely quoted in July by Chinese state media as a whistleblower. But a month later, Chinese media removed those articles after the Swiss embassy said this person probably doesn't exist and called the news false. According to Facebook's report, the campaign has targeted English-speaking audiences in the UK and US and Chinese-speaking audiences in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Tibet. But it adds the campaign was largely unsuccessful. On Thursday, another social media giant also joined the action. Twitter removed more than 2,000 accounts connected to Chinese information campaigns. These accounts aim to counter accusations that the regime is suppressing Uyghurs in the Xinjiang region. China's coal supply shortage has led to a return of an old-time commodity, ration coupons. That's after enduring prolonged, widespread outages. A China affairs analyst speaks with NTD.
China is reintroducing its old-time food ration coupon system, but this time it's for something else. According to a Chinese media report last week, ahead of winter, the local energy bureau in northern China's Shaanxi province announced a new currency for fuel, a coal coupon.
There is often a great shortage of certain goods or materials when this happens.
Since May, a wide swath of the country has suffered outages due to coal shortages. The situation worsened in September, and the power to many factories was cut abruptly. But China recently claimed its coal supply shortage had eased significantly. Shaanxi is China's largest coal-producing region. Yet the local government there still implemented the coal coupon to limit supply. A worker at the local bureau told a Chinese media outlet that the new coupon works just like the food ration coupons from the past.
The coal coupon, in fact, is the first example of the revival of the rationing system and planned economy.
Back in the 1950s, China began issuing specific coupons for food, clothes, oil, and even bicycles. Without them, people could not purchase the goods. This lasted more than 40 years. Tang says this system enforces a national monopoly facilitated by a planned economy.
It's everything from the production to sale and price, all monopolized by the government, controlled by the government, and then rationed to certain residents according to the government's planned economy.
Tang says the planned economy is characterized by backward productivity, which prompted authorities to issue ration coupons to limit consumption. The coupon system was phased out after China transformed from a centrally planned economy to a market economy from the West.
So China's economy has improved. That is, everyone's lives have improved. And the ration coupon system has pulled out.
But now it's starting to make a comeback in China.
It reflects from one side that the overall environment of China's current economy is rapidly declining. So some local governments have to reconsider the use of a planned economy model.
Tang adds if China's economy can't recover, the rationing system may spread to other sectors sooner or later.
The European Union unveils a €300 billion plan to answer to China's Belt and Road. It's called Global Gateway, and the European Commission says it's confident it will truly benefit local communities and support the EU's strategic interests.
The European Union unveiled the €300 billion plan on Wednesday. The program will mobilize nearly $340 billion in public and private funds by 2027. The plan, called Global Gateway, will focus on physical infrastructure like fiber optic cables, clean transport corridors, and clean power transmission lines to strengthen digital transport and energy networks. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the plan would be in line with high labor and environmental standards.
We want to take a different approach. We want to show that a democratic, value-driven approach can deliver on the most pressing challenges.
The Commission has rejected comparisons between Global Gateway and China's Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. Under BRI, Beijing has been providing enormous loans to developing countries that can barely afford the projects. Some call Beijing's ambitious initiative a global trail of trouble or debt trap diplomacy, and so on. Von der Leyen says, unlike China, the EU Global Gateway would ensure the benefits of local communities and also bring the private sector with less risky investments. The EU is China's biggest trading partner, but they are also economic competitors and strategic rivals.
And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching, and see you tomorrow.